This podcast is a proud member of Pod Nation Media Network.
Flicker of reels, the shadows crawl. Curtains rise, a ghostly sprawl. The frames are whispers, the stories call. The drifters hum in a hollow tune. Moonlight cuts through velvet gloom. Is it a dream or a real too soon? Step into the screen where the dark turns keen. Journey with the cinephile, unseen, unseen. The veils twist and turn as the silent light burns. A world unknown where the shadows yearn.
Hello and welcome, listeners, to Journey with a Cinephile, a horror movie podcast, where we take a deep dive into the world of horror cinema, from the eerie classics to the latest spine-chilling releases. Join me as I explore the history, themes, and artistry of horror one film at a time. Whether you're a seasoned horror fan or just stepping into the shadows, this journey is for you. So dim the lights, embrace the fear, and let's talk horror. And let's do that on episode 334. I am your tour guide of David Garrett Jr., recorded out of Columbus, Ohio. And for this episode here for you is going to be my Centennial Club number 25. So the two featured reviews I'm going to be having for you here is the first one. I went to the Gateway Film Center to check out Ready or Not 2. Here I come. And I'll pair this up with The Magician. So what we're doing here is a through line here of people and magic kind of being incorporated into like the real world and everything, and seeing kind of its effects and how people navigate that. And then for mini reviews here, it's going to end up being my 1986 Scouring Through the Sixes rewatch is going to be Manhunter, and then I have some screeners here of Dead Lover, Haunters of the Silence, and New Fear's Eve. And it's a little bit lighter episode here for mini reviews because I'm also going to end this out then with two documentaries I got to check out here semi-recently of Video Nasties, Draconian Days, and On the Trail of Bigfoot, The Search. So I don't think there's anything else here for this intro that I need to say outside of thank you so much for listening, and I hope you enjoy coming on this journey with me.
Are you looking for a movie podcast with deep dives, interviews, and thoughtful film analysis?
We ain't got none of that. What do we got?
You want to hold the bucket?
Right, I'll hold the bucket, sit in the
I'll
cup
just
chair.
stand there with my. I will never blink. I'll just be there holding the bucket.
I will
like,
never blink on her drapes, most likely. You look like a drape jizzer.
R.I.P. That sweet, sweet pussy.
It is known that Jessica Tandy had the sweetest pussy in Hollywood.
If you don't know, Google it. Don't Google Jessica Tandy's pussy, you guys. Don't do it. Don't do it. Doom Generation.
Available anywhere you find podcasts.
With Rise Coffee.
And for my first mini review here is going to be Manhunter from 1986. This is written and directed by Michael Mann. This stars William Peterson, Tom Noonan, and Dennis Farina. This is a police procedural, serial killer, suspense mystery, crime thriller. I consider this to be horror, and so does IMDb. IMDb doesn't. Letterboxd does. But then this is from the United States. It is currently sitting on a 7.2 on IMDb and a 3.9 on Letterboxd, where the synopsis being: former FBI agent Will Graham, who retired after catching Hannibal Lecter, returns to duty to engage in a risky cat-and-mouse game to capture a new killer. So for this one here, Will Graham is actually being portrayed by Peterson, and then Lecter by Brian Cox. So this is a film that I learned about when I was in college. I discovered it while I was searching out the franchise for like Hannibal, Silence of the Lambs. This intrigued me to learn that this was a different version of Red Dragon, like the book by Thomas Harris. After seeing both versions, I did go back and end up reading that source material. I'm a big fan of this story. So it has been, since that one time that I've watched this one, and I've been kind of excited because I've heard people talk about it on podcasts and everything. So, I'm watching it here with a critical eye as a Scouring Through the Sixes watch. And so where I'm going to start is that I'm going to briefly compare this to like the other Red Dragon film as a little bit of the source material. So like I said, I'm an apologist for that other movie. I know that there are people who don't like it, but I'm fascinated by the story, so I'm a little bit more forgiving. After this viewing, I believe this is a superior version. That's not to say that there aren't things that I don't like here, as well as that there's not anything that I like better in that other version. But so that's going to be the extent of what I want to do there. Might be a little bit of stuff that kind of pops up, but it'll be very surface level. So now to set up, Mann directs a tense thriller about a dark subject. We meet Will, who is a retired after his trauma after capturing Dr. Lecter. He reluctantly returns to prevent a family murder, and he's motivated by his own wife and son, as there's already been 2 families that have been killed, so he's trying to prevent anybody else. And this shows the toll of his work and how he catches criminals, explaining his past breakdown. Peterson effectively portrays his haunted character. So then the villain story is revealed later into the film, enhancing that feeling of the investigating the crime with Will. The tonal shift comes when we have like Francis's introduction, and that'll be Francis Dollarhide portrayed by Noonan. Despite his minor facial deformity, he desires to be loved, particularly by a character here of Reba, who she's a coworker that is blind, and she is portrayed by Joan Allen. And we're really kind of highlighting Francis's deep psychological issues. Noonan's subdued and eerie portrayal of his character's darkness, magnified by his height and downplayed. He has a downplayed cleft palate. That's all terrifying. He doesn't necessarily have the rage of like what Ralph Fiennes did, but you don't need it though either. Let's then shift over to the investigation a bit more, and this is something that Mann is able to set up and build on. Having no smoking gun, Will seeks out Dr. Lecter's help. Part of this is that he's a celebrity, hoping that he might have contacted this killer. He's also comparing notes, and it's a great, give and take between the two. Hannibal's annoyed that he was bested and will play mind games for his revenge. Seeing the connections that Will then makes from there and what they've uncovered here logically makes sense. Seeing him work is something that I thoroughly thought was, well done. So additional themes to include here would be like the duality of like the hunter/hunted, Francis by FBI, Will, fearing the reverse via Dr. Lecter. Will is indirectly responsible for Francis through Hannibal, another killer, and struggles with this loss of self. The cost of professionalism is seen as Will bends rules to stop Dollarhide, and Freddy, acts as this sleazy reporter. He's actually been portrayed by a young here Stephen Lang. And we also have voyeurism is central to the Francis ritual, along with dysmorphia, as he attempts to transform into the Red Dragon. So it should be enough for the story. Let's go over the acting performances. Peterson does a great job here as his tortured Will. He wants to help, but at what cost? Noonan is terrifying as his subdued Dollarhide. Farina is good as the FBI agent who pulls Will back in. Cox is a terrifying Hannibal Lecter. His mind games with Will is effective, and seeing the lengths that he'll go. I also want to give credit here to Kim Grice. She is actually Molly Graham, who is Will's wife. I've already brought up Joan Allen is solid in her role. Lang works in his. We also have some cameos here by Chris Elliott, Frankie Faison, Bill Smetrovich, and Marshall Bell. All that's left, going to be some filmmaking aspects here. The cinematography and framing are good. It feels like the 1980s police procedural films, which tracks how they shot the attack scenes are eerie. It is light on the effects, but the dread and fear is what we need here. This doesn't need much in the effects department. This is more about the crime and their effects on people and their characters. Other than that, the music isn't great, but there is charm to it. It mostly fits for what was needed. So in conclusion, this is a superior, tense, and unnerving psychological thriller directed by Mann. It excels with Peterson's nuanced performance of the traumatized Will Graham and Noonan's terrifying, subdued performance as Francis Dollarhide. The film effectively builds dread through its focus on the investigation and psychological toll of its characters and the distinct 1980s procedural aesthetic. While light on the visual effects, the film succeeded by emphasizing character-driven crime and the horrifying human cost, solidifying its place as a compelling and definitive adaptation of the Red Dragon story. So then my rating here then, Manhunter is going to be a 9 out of 10. And then up next here I have Dead Lover from 2025. This is directed by Grace Glowicki, who also wrote this with Ben Petrie. Now they both actually star in this with Leah Dawes as well as Lowen Morrow. So this is a body horror, comedy, romance, sci-fi thriller film that is from a co-production of Canada and the United States. This is currently sitting on a 5.9 on IMDb and a 3.4 on Letterboxd, where our synopsis being: a lonely gravedigger who stinks of corpses finally meets her dream man, but their whirlwind affair is cut short when he tragically drowns at sea. Grief-stricken, she goes to morbid lengths to resurrect through madcap scientific experiments, resulting in grave consequences and unlikely love. So this is a film that I learned about when it was hitting limited theaters in the United Kingdom and Ireland. I was able to grab a screener here thanks to Emma from Strike Media. Learning that this was leaning to the gimmick where you could smell certain things, like they give you cards, it sounds like, made me think of like William Castle. I unfortunately couldn't make it to any of those screenings, living in the US here, which I think would be a fun one to see with people. So this is a 2026 wide release horror film that is going to be a voyage to the 5-0 due to its festival appearances. And so I'm going to start here is by saying that Seeing this alone at home isn't ideal. It feels more like a crowd movie, especially with the cards that you're supposed to have where you can like scratch and smell certain things that they're wanting you to. I'm hoping this gets a proper release and that card comes in like a Blu-ray or like a 4K, anything like that, as that's something I want to, kind of set up here before I delve into deeper thoughts. Now that it's set up, let's explore what we're getting. I need to start with filmmaking. This is a surreal art house film. I appreciate that, especially since it is working with a limited budget, but it feels bigger than that. There's some limited sets, and it feels almost like a stage play. There's charm that comes with it. The limited practical effects add to it. I love the absurdity of different things that we get to see. This is all what makes it work in an interesting way. I'll then come back to the rest of that and need to discuss there, and let's look at the story, though. This works well as a basic, relatable concept. We have this lonely gravedigger who is portrayed by Glowicki, and she's ostracized due to her smell and profession. She finally finds somebody to love, only to lose them almost immediately. So contemplating suicide, she receives a postcard, but her hope is shattered again when that ship sinks, further complicating matters. We have this widower who claims her lover was a liar, and the limited issues they share combine with the betrayal and creates this driving narrative tension of like trust issues. And this is actually kind of a tough one here because we only have 4 actors. Now, 3 of them play multiple roles here. So I'm going to kind of run through here. It's like there's a priest that we meet at first that the gravedigger does, and that person's actually portrayed by Leah Dawes. This is kind of taking place in Victorian times. I want to point that out here. So we have this opera singer who also has passed away, portrayed by Dawes. Her husband is portrayed by Morrow, and he's quite distraught. Now, the opera singer had a brother portrayed by Petrie, and this is the person that the gravedigger is now smitten with. And then it is that widower is the one who is trying, it kind of creates this divide. So the story is also borrowing from Frankenstein, featuring a mad scientist element with the gravedigger trying to resurrect her dead lover using only his finger and like a lizard extract serum. This has some hilarious outcomes at first, and the subsequent actions are kind of a big deal there that kind of make this work. The second attempt echoes like the Bride of Frankenstein with the creation of a potential mate who is then shunned, exploring themes of free will and choice. Other themes to bring up here would be the subjectivity of beauty. Now, if the lover is to be believed, he doesn't mind that the gravedigger has a distinct smell, almost loves it. This does bring up the notion here that everybody has their own kinks and what they're attracted to. There isn't a universal beauty standard. There is some queer ideology here as well. This becomes prominent as the gravedigger starts her experiments. I do like this exploration of grief and the refusal of loss, themes that are found in Mary Shelley's famous novel. Let's then go back over here to discuss the filmmaking aspects. I love the do-it-yourself approach. The cinematography and framing work. There's like a black box theater aesthetic mixed with 16mm grain. That's effective. The effects work for this budget that they're working with as well. This leads to some sound design as well as like lowbrow humor with like fart noises and vomit is played for comedy. This makes it feel a bit juvenile, but if that's your humor, I think you'll appreciate this. Then let's go over here to give credit to the actor performances. Glowicki as our co-writer and director work as our lead, the gravedigger. Petrie, Dawes, and Morrow taking on multiple roles is great. Made me chuckle trying to figure out who was who. Low budget approach with the makeup and costumes was also effective. So in conclusion, this is an ambitious, quirky, and surreal art house horror comedy that thrives on its limited budget and do-it-yourself aesthetic. While the full experience, particularly the smell-o-vision gimmick, is lost when you're viewing it at home alone, the film nonetheless delivers an engaging narrative exploring themes of love, loss, betrayal, and the refusal of grief, all filtered through a delightful Frankenstein-esque lens. The strong multi-role performances and effective low-budget filmmaking make this a charming and absurd romp that is sure to find its crowd, especially for those who appreciate its specific brand of juvenile and dark humor. It certainly is a unique cinematic endeavor worth seeking out. So my rating though for this one is it doesn't fully work with how I watched it. Not to say it's bad by any stretch though either, and I give this one a 6 out of 10 and would recommend it, and I believe this should be hitting VOD here soonish. Then I got to check out Haunters of the Silence. This is from 2025. It is written and directed and co-starring Valinda Thorson Heinekinen and Tatu Heinekinen. And then this also has John Hagum. And then I also think there's one more actor here to include, or there's a couple more actors here to include. It's going to be Davey Furcho does a voice, and then there's Sandy Keys who's also a voice. Now, this is a folk horror film that is from the United States. This is currently sitting on a 7.1 on IMDb and not enough ratings on Letterboxd, but I would say about a 2.5 to a 4-star movie over there with a synopsis being. In the stillness of a night, a lone man is trapped in the state of deep sleep paralysis. As darkness closes in, he must confront the ghosts of his past. So this is one I got the chance to see thanks to our co-writer, co-director, and star of Heinekennen, who reached out. He provided a press release and a screener link. Now, since I enjoy helping out independent films by doing reviews, I figured I would check this one out. Now, what I didn't realize was this is a wide-release 2026 horror film that, as I was checking out the dates before actually watching it, but this is also going to be a voyage to the fives. So what I'm going to say here and where I'm going to start is that this is a masterclass in low-budget filmmaking. We are limited to the story given, but it doesn't need to be complex. What is effective here is by developing a creepy atmosphere surrounded and centered around a phenomenon that many people have experienced or understand enough. There is this able to simulate sleep paralysis and the wild things that people see that they're undergoing. From the trivia I saw, this is based on something that Heinekennen actually experienced. If I mispronounce your name, I do apologize. So what's interesting is that we're also seeing this figure of the Hat Man, who is portrayed by Hagum, who matches up with something that other people have said. I've watched videos and seen documentaries talking about individuals who have a human shape wearing a brimmed hat and just keeping to the shadows. What is even more terrifying is that their eyes are glowing as well. Including this entity is something that offers something that people can connect with and is based on like a more modern ideas like creepypastas. So it's not to say that there aren't other themes here as well. I do like this idea of grief and trying to preserve memories without dialogue and just kind of being shown images. We learn that Kay, who is actually our lead character portrayed by Heinekennen, has lost somebody close to him. This isn't the first either. There is a fight here to hold on to the memory while also needing to heal and move past. I also think there's a good touch here that we have these pictures that he has to honor and keep that memory alive and how they change, which is eerie in itself. So the last element here would be the anatomy of sleep paralysis. Like what has been brought up here is that we're drawn on personal experiences. What terrifies me is the idea that sleep for Kay isn't restful. It's like a haunted house. He's immobilized, unable to wake, and is trapped in a vivid nightmare that feels like reality. Shifting slightly, I do love the duality of modern technology like his television and cell phone, along with pagan elements like burning incense and the folklore items. It makes for an interesting dynamic since this is using modern mythology. So that should be enough for the story. Let's go over here that truly drives this, which is filmmaking. The cinematography and framing are great. It also feels like it's done in black and white, which makes sense. Most people sleep in complete darkness, so this is done in shades of gray. Coupling with the dark ambient music, it's an unsettling feel. Now for the effects, this is mostly done practically. There's some stop motion with bones that I absolutely loved. Other than that, we have this weird sets that kind of invoke German expressionism. So this is made well across the board. So let's briefly go over the actor performances. This one is mostly a one-person show. Heinekennen was great in what was needed. He is showing fear and exploring the dark world of his nightmares was good. It has brought that all to life there. Hagum is kept to the shadows, which is menacing. Thoresen, Heineken, and Vircho round us out for what was needed. So in conclusion, this is a surprisingly effective and masterfully done piece of low-budget independent horror cinema. The co-directors here of Thoresen, Heinekennen, and Heinekennen craft a terrifying, intimate narrative by focusing on the personal experience of sleep paralysis and grounding in genuine folklore and modern creepypastas. The film excels through powerful cinematography, dark ambient sound, and German expressionism-inspired practical effects, creating palpable dread. Coupled with Heinekennen's strong, isolated performance, this must-watch psychological transforms a simple concept into a rich, unsettling exploration of grief, memory, and conscious-minded nightmares. So my rating here for Haunters of the Silence, I'm going to give this a 6.5 out of 10. And this one, I believe, is actually on Tubi now if you are interested in checking it out. Then the last feature I'm going to cover here before I do some of these documentaries is going to be New Fear's Eve. This is co-directed between Eric Huskins and PJ Starks. If I'm mispronouncing any of these names, I do apologize, but this is starring Lily Claire Harvey, Matthew Tenor, and Turner Vaughn. This is a B-horror, slasher, comedy horror film that's from the United States. It is currently sitting on a 5.5 on IMDb and a 2.9 on Letterboxd, with our synopsis being: following three best friends who involuntarily prepare for Hooper Industries' annual New Year's Eve party, which turns deadly when a murderer sets his sights on them. So this is a film I got the opportunity to see thanks to co-writer and director Hero Starks. He reached out with information about the film. Now, since I like to review independent horror films when I can, I decided to check this out. This looks to be coming to Screenbox, which is a service that I have. Now, Bloody Disgusting also behind it. Now, this is a 2026 horror film while also being a Voyage to the Fives watch. So where I'm going to go ahead and start is by saying that this is a throwback slasher film. We don't need to overdevelop the story. There's a mass killer who is moving around this area, going to kill people. What is interesting is that we get a slight reveal later to explain why the killer is moving around. This is something I wanted to give credit for. Other than that, we get a bunch of creative kills and a good number of characters to build that body count. So with all that set up, let's discuss our three main characters here. They have strong chemistry, and it makes it feel like their long-term bond is believable, and they're all distinct. So the girl of the group is Leslie Starks, portrayed by Harvey, and she's the only girl, like I was saying. She hides her crush on Brian Storm, who is portrayed by Vaughn. And then there's also in their group here Moses Mosley, portrayed by Tickener. I think it might be, if I mispronounce the name, I do apologize once again. So what we have here, though, is that Leslie's mother has some knowledge of the killer, as we see her and her younger sister are trying to pack up to come get her. And then their uncle also seems to have information as well, and he is Officer Flanagan, portrayed by Jay Woolston. I think that's how you might say his name there. And then we also have Moses as the over-the-top joker in that group. Brian is good-natured glue of the trio. I find their relatability based on people that I would know helps the story. Now, I do want to go ahead and talk about the look of our killer. Using this old-time plague doctor thing is great. I'm not entirely sure why outside of a reveal later. There are allusions to a plot much bigger ideas, but this does fall short on revealing much there. My guess is that there is hope here for like follow-up films, help fleshes out more and not give away too much in this first one. This looks to be like the look of the killer. I love it. I don't know. I think we need a little bit more though. So then there's some other elements of the story here to bring up would be the critique of corporate culture. Having a mandatory holiday party, especially with toxic coworkers and management, is something I can connect with. There's also some interesting ideas here with the finality of New Year's Eve and how this massacre takes place, like a new year looming. It feels like rebirth. There's some randomness of evil that we don't learn the motives and how at times unexpected things can just happen, uproot in our lives. I'm going to shift over here to the filmmaking aspects. This is made well enough. The cinematography and framing are good. Credit to how they hide the seams of the effects. They went practical with most everything that they could, and that is something I appreciated. The care there is also good. Their creativity and brutalness of the effects, something else to give credit for. The music and sound design worked for what was needed. There's some additional element here that I want to talk about, since this is a love letter to the subgenre of slashers. I don't necessarily love how they use name of classic characters or actors, since it does feel at times like they're winking at us. That's not something I'm going to hold against it. There's some snappy dialogue that did make me laugh. The only issue here is it makes it feel like a movie, and it feels contrived. So this kind of feels inspired by Tarantino. All that's left then to be the acting performances. Harvey, Tickener, and Vaughn are good as our leads. Jesse McDonald works as the person who's portraying the killer. How he moves and how he looks works there. I did love the cameos here by Jeffrey Riddick, Felissa Rose, Dave Sheridan, Hannah Furman, and we also have Jason Crow. Woolston and the rest of the cast were quirky characters that add charm to this, plus we have a large cast of cannon fodder that I did appreciate. So in conclusion, this delivers a solid, well-made throwback slasher experience that respects the subgenre while offering a few interesting modern twists. The film excels with its charismatic leads, effective practical gore, and immediately iconic design of the plague Dr. Killer, while delivery holds back on revealing the killer's full motivation, suggesting future installment. The current narrative, while provides a fun, brutal critique of corporate life wrapped up in New Year's Eve theme of rebirth, I recommend this film to fans of classic slashers who appreciate strong filmmaking and a high body count. So my rating here is I'm going to come in with a 6.5 out of 10, and I believe this one is also on Tubi as well right now if you want to go ahead and check it out over there. And then I have the documentary Video Nasties Draconian Days. So this is the follow-up documentary, if you're curious. So this one is directed by Jake West. It features Cyan Barber, Martin Barker, and Graham Bright. So this is a documentary that is from the United Kingdom. It is currently sitting on a 7.8 on IMDb and a 3.6 on Letterboxd, with a synopsis being: prepare to be corrupted and depraved once more by the sequel to the definitive guide to the video nasties phenomena, the most extraordinary and scandalous era in the history of British films. All 82 that fell foul to the Director of Public Prosecution's DZ Section 3DZ list are trailer featured and specifically filmed intros for each title. So yeah, that's actually kind of something I haven't delved into yet. I've just watched the main documentary, and so I actually learned about this originally thanks to Duncan from the podcast Under the Stairs. It went on a list of ones to check out years ago. The big issue that I ran into the longest time is it wasn't streaming. I ended up picking this up on a sale when purchasing something else from, I don't even remember where now. Finding time to watch the doc became difficult when with all the things that I do watch. So I was able to rip this to a video file and I treated it like a podcast. So what is interesting is following the original here is that this goes to the fallout of what happened in 1984 with the Video Recordings Act and the power that it gave the BBFC. Now, what is interesting is that we are seeing, what they were doing to video stores that were carrying these films and were considered video nasties. It also brought notoriety to films that were more than likely would have fell into obscurity for just how they were made. So the subtitle here of Draconian Days is fitting because this is showing like harsh punishments that don't necessarily fit the crime. So this also has built-in bias as well. Technically, a film like Schindler's List or The Last Temptation of Christ would qualify. What they were doing was, those were more difficult to go after because those companies actually had money to defend. So this fell on smaller titles where companies and filmmakers behind it that didn't necessarily have the resources. I like seeing interviews with directors who were directly affected, and one in particular who just really kind of gave the finger to him and kind of did what he could to fight this. Now, I really want to kind of start to think about the elements that this was made and what it could do to the adult industry. So we have James Furman, who was in charge of the censorship team, pushed to create a separate look for pornography. This started to lead to the downfall of the BBFC because it put chinks in their armor. And the different things that were swept up into this were crazy to see. I would say that I love all the interviews here from like Alan Jones, Kay Egan, Neil Marshall, Kim Newman, Christopher Smith, and Stephen Thrower. There are many others as well, but having lived through the era like this, they provided some good insight. The documentary also was well put together. I love seeing the editing of footage and images to show things that they're saying. This also flies by, which is great with the amount of information being presented. So this serves as a fascinating and infuriating look at the time when censorship drastically impacted filmmaking and distribution in the United Kingdom. By focusing on the post-1984 fallout of the Video Recordings Act, it expertly details the arbitrary application of power wielded by the BBFC and the lasting consequences on smaller film companies. For anybody interested in film history, censorship, or social, political, surrounding like media panic, this is an essential and well-executed piece of work that contextualizes the real-world impact of moral crusades against art. I'm now stoked to dive into the supplemental material that I came with it, so something that just let you know. So my rating though for the Video Nasties Draconian Days, I gave this one an 8 out of 10. And I checked out this documentary of On the Trail of Bigfoot, The Search. This is from 2019. It was written and directed by Seth Breedlove, who also is featured in this with Mark Matizik and Lauren Coleman. But this also features the like of Shannon LeGros, who would go on to work more with Small Town Monsters, which is the people behind this. So it's a documentary that is from the United States. It is currently sitting on a 6.2 on IMDb, and not enough ratings on Letterboxd, but I'd say about a 3-star over there, and the synopsis being, journey back through the history of one of America's last great mysteries in the new documentary. Join researchers, investigators, and historians as they uncover the story behind centuries-old mystery, the creature known as Bigfoot. So I saw this one out as I had watched some of the later ones that are in this On the Trail of Bigfoot series that was made by Breedlove and his team at Small Town Monsters. What I like is that he interviews a number of individuals that have in part dedicated their lives to proving that Bigfoot exists. Something that is intriguing is that almost every state has their own variation on the lore. Whether it's called Sasquatch, Bigfoot, or even Skunk Ape falls into this category. The folklore that surrounds this, it makes me wonder how much of this is hearsay from like one story and then it travels to another area. This is possible in the past when somebody would hear a tale and then hit the road. It would just take more time and effort back in the day, and I mean now today it's so much easier to do, so it's kind of interesting that these folklores kind of spread. So then there's something that I wouldn't have brought up here is this is actually kind of using science behind proving the existence of this creature. Breedlove and his team point out that some groups are doing well with using the scientific method in order to show that there is a Bigfoot. Others are just kind of going out making whim decisions and anything that they get on film or anything like that, but it makes it difficult to prove in the end. So an element that stuck out to me as well is focusing around the Olympic Washington area is how vast the forest and the area is. It could explain why it's difficult to find the creature due to migration, following the seasons and the animals and like vegetation that would be their diet. There's also this wild theory in some cases that maybe Sasquatch is actually an alien. We learn of instances where you would have seen this cryptid and there would be UFO sightings first. This is a little bit more far-fetched, but there's always that what if. Now, something good here with the Small Town Monsters documentaries, I love that they present the information. This one is more of like a commentary about how some enthusiasts want to prove it. Others don't necessarily care if they believe them or not. Seeing the evidence or hearing the recordings that is gathered is good. It gave me a little bit uneasy feeling, so credit there. Overall, this is made and how it is like solid. Moves at a good pace. It's something that you don't necessarily have to sit down and watch. I kind of treat these like video podcasts. So in conclusion, this serves as a fascinating look into the dedication of individuals committed to finding proof of this elusive creature. by presenting various perspectives, from those employing strict scientific methodologies to those sharing anecdotal evidence and more outlandish theories. The documentary successfully captures the breadth of the Bigfoot phenomenon and its enduring appeal in American folklore. The work by Breedlove and Small Town Monsters remains a compelling, well-paced exploration that respects its subject matter, ultimately leaving the viewer with a greater understanding of why the search for Sasquatch continues to captivate and inspire. So my rating here then for On the Trail of Bigfoot, The Search, I give this one a 6.5 out of 10. And this is streaming on Tubi if you are curious. And that's all I have here then for mini reviews. Let me go ahead then and get you over to the trailer of my first featured review.
Hide and seek? You're really gonna play that?
Thank God it's over.
You've caused quite a stir, Mrs. Ladomas. You married into that family. Now they're dead. What you didn't know is that this goes far beyond them. By surviving hide and seek, you've triggered a new game. This time against the High Council families. Double or nothing. This part will be familiar. They will try to kill you.
Welcome to our home.
Hunters, may the best family win.
Skippy screams.
The game begins in 5, 4, 3, 2, 1.
I'm not playing.
Okay. Prunella, kill the sister.
No, God damn it, don't hurt her!
Whoever wins runs everything.
Everything?
The world.
Can't believe you dragged me into this shit.
It's exciting. What's exciting for me is terrifying for you.
Clear.
And for my first featured review is going to be Ready or Not 2, Here I Come. This is from 2026, directed between the Radio Silence guys of Matt Bentinelli-Olpin and Tyler Gillette. This was written, now they're giving credit here on IMDb to Bentinelli-Olpin and Gillette, but the writers that I'm seeing for the most part are going to be Guy Busick and R. Christopher Murphy. This stars Samara Weaving, Catherine Newton, and Elijah Wood, while also having the likes here of Sarah Michelle Gellar, Sean Hatosi, David Cronenberg, Dan Birian, Olivia Chang, Anthony Hall, Varan Saranga, Nadim Umar Kitbe, Masa Lidsdek, Nasser Carbonella, Maya J, Juan Pablo Romero, Kevin Durand, Kara Wooten, and Grant Nichols. This is a dark comedy. They're kind of considered a slasher. I don't necessarily go that far, but splatter horror comedy thriller film that is from the United States. It is currently sitting on a 7.0 on IMDb and a 3.5 on Letterboxd, or a synopsis being. After surviving one deadly game, Grace and her sister Faith now must outrun 4 rival families competing for a powerful throne where the winner takes all. So in this one, Grace is once again being portrayed by Weaving, and then her sister's going to be Faith, portrayed by Newton. So this is a film that I wasn't shocked to learn was being made. The original was a story built around a children's game of hide and seek. What they developed around that made for a bloody fun romp. It's been a good handful of years since it came out, so that made me pause. Regardless, though, Weaving, as somebody I'm a fan of, especially because she continues to work in the genre. I was kind of excited to go see this here as a 2026 horror film. I got to see it in the Gateway Film Center, so there's that. So let's do some featured notes, and I'll start with our directors here of the duo of, once again, Radio Silence. They've come up before. So Centennial open, I've seen 7 of his 9 features for 77%. Everything that I've seen is in horror, where I'm just missing Devil's Due, so I'm at 87% of his 8 films that were in genre. Then Gillette was also the same works as his co-director. Then there are 2 assistant directors here. First is going to be Andrew M. Robinson. So he probably came up for Thanksgiving, that slasher film. So I've seen 7 of his 19 for 36%. He's done 5 in horror, and I've seen 3 for 60%. I've seen Thanksgiving, this, and the movie Skinwalkers. I'm just missing Regression and Detox. So then there's also Eric Dupree, who also worked on Thanksgiving. He's done 13 movies. I've seen 4 for 30%. Has 4 in horror. I've seen 3 for 75%. He's done Thanksgiving, this, and the day that I've seen. I'm just missing Regression. Then to our writers, we're going to start with Busick. I've seen everything that he's done now, all in horror too. He's written 7. This would include like Screams 5, 6, and 7, Final Destination Bloodlines, Abigail, and both Ready or Not films. This is his first credit, though, as an original writer. Then Murphy, who co-wrote, has 2 with this, and he's done both Ready or Not films. That's it. He also first credit as a original writer. Then, like I was saying, credit on IMDb here is given to Radio Silence for writing. I've seen everything that they've done with their like short and VHS, Southbound, and now this. Gillette isn't credited for the short and Southbound, but for VHS and writing this. So then to the cast. I have also brought up Weaving before. So I've seen 9 of her 28 films for 32%. She's also done 4 shorts. The only thing not in horror that she's done that I've seen is built like the 3 billboards outside of Ebbing, Missouri. In horror, I'm at 7 of 8 for her works, 87%. I'm only missing Mayhem. Then her co-star of Newton has been in 26 movies. I've seen 7 for 26%. Not horror, she was in Ant-Man, Quantumanium, and Blockers. In horror, she's done 8. I've seen 4 for 50%. I've seen like Lisa Frankenstein, Abigail, this, and Paranormal Activity 4. I'm just missing Freaky, Dreamquill, and a documentary for Paranormal Activity, which I own in the Blu-ray set. I just haven't watched it yet. So she's slated for something upcoming called The Devil's Mouth. Lastly, I'm going to look at Wood. He's been in 96 motion pictures and 23 shorts. I've seen 16 of his stuff for 16%. Not horror would be like the Lord of the Rings trilogy. He was also in Eternal Sunshine of a Not-So-Spotless Mind and Sin City. In genre, he has 10. I've seen 6. I've seen The Monkey, The Faculty, This, Maniac, Come to Daddy, and Cooties. I'm just missing The Good Son. I've seen most of that one. I've just never watched it all the way through to completion in one sitting. And then I've never seen Why Horror, Children in the Night, and The Making of Maniac. There's like a remake documentary thing there that I have not seen as of yet. All right, so for this movie here, we start where the original leaves off. Grace comes out of the burning house and sits down to have a cigarette. There are sirens coming. Grace then needs heroic measures in the back of an ambulance to bring her back due to blood loss and shock. We then shift over to seeing Chester Danforth, portrayed by the great Cronenberg. He's an older man watching a group of screens. There's a war that's going on, and it doesn't sound like there's going to be a ceasefire in sight anytime soon. That is until Chester makes a call, and it happens immediately. He is then joined by his twin children, Ursula, portrayed by Geller, and Titus, portrayed by Hatoshi. They've been called here because there's an important game that is starting soon, due to Grace surviving and the Lidomas family being killed. He wants them to do a drastic thing to help put them in position to win. So Grace then wakes up in the hospital. She's handcuffed to her bed. Detective Bassett, portrayed by Nichols, is asking her questions about what happened. It doesn't look good for her, and it sounds like extended prison time is in her future. That's when she gets a visitor. It's her emergency contact, Faith. It sounds like they haven't spoken in many years. Faith asks her sister about what happened. Grace is worried about telling her, mostly due to her not believing. The other part is to keep her safe and out of it. By how outrageous it sounds, Grace is being taken to the police station because of it. So Grace, having defeated her in-laws, learns that Mr. LaBelle's lawyer, who's portrayed by Elijah Wood, that Double or Nothing game is starting now. Surviving families who received LaBelle's blessing are now competing for control of this high council. When Chester's dead, the Danforths are in, the twins that is. Other contenders are Wan Chang-zi, portrayed by Chang. There is Mandu Rajan, portrayed by Saranga. There is Ignacio El Coldan, portrayed by Carbonella. And then there's also Bill Wilkinson, portrayed by Durand. Now, he gets mentioned, but we see he breaks some of the rules, and this results in a deadly consequence. So this all takes place in a resort owned by the Danforths. Grace and Faith are kidnapped and brought here. Each of the families are represented. Their loved ones are watching from a command center. Someone of note is going to be Francesca El Caldo, portrayed by Jay. She was supposed to marry Grace's husband and now resents her, as she is also present as Grace's husband broke it off with her to marry Grace. If the hunter of the family dies, their next of kin has to step in. Grace has an added wrinkle of protecting her and her sister as they need to survive once again until dawn. There are rules here that can help shake up the game, though, as well. So that's really my recap and introduction of the character. What I want to start is by saying this is a fun film, much like its predecessor. Something I want to give credit for is doing a follow-up 7 years later, it doesn't feel like they missed a beat. There are some fun callbacks. I love that this one picks up right where the last one left off. Grace doesn't want to be in this hospital gown. So, like, when she's starting to try to escape and everything, when things start to get put into motion, she puts back on that wedding dress from the original, which is great. The fun part there is it's so stained with blood that it's now red, for obvious reasons. This definitely captures that charm that made the first one fun. Now that it's set up, let's kind of look at what this is building on for the foundation and developing more of the lore. The Ladomas family built their empire on board games, and it requires a game to be played on their wedding night, which, of course, hide and seek is the most dreaded. Since Grace won, a clause is invoked, allowing a new council head to be crowned. The power-hungry families will likely compete for this, and have to compete for this. The established harsh rule framework is effective, and it works for the setup. Something else that you need to build on would involve our main characters. I like that this doesn't violate continuity. We know from the previous film that Grace doesn't have a family. That isn't necessarily true. She grew up in foster care with her sister. The first movie doesn't harp on it too much, so that's where I can kind of feel like you're not violating continuity, because I believe she could be estranged. Things do line up with Grace seeking a family and how Faith wants something similar. Both are stubborn and need to solve their differences to make this work, so that's also why I feel like they avoid kind of violating continuity as well. Let's then bring up themes that are explored. Something I haven't explicitly stated would be the persistence of power and greed. If it truly is never enough for the elites, which is a fitting commentary on the current state of the world, there's also this cost of survival, both physically and mentally, with the trauma that it causes. There's also a cyclical nature of the violence. The hunted will continue to be unless they fight back against their actors, making them similar. So I kind of think like that's a good way to kind of show and shift things, and I should actually go ahead and say they're attackers, not their actors. That was just a misspoken thing on my end. I think that should be enough for the story. Let's go over to look at the action performances now. Weaving steps right back into this role of Grace like she never left. She plays well off face, so that helps. Newton was good in her role there, similar enough that I could believe they're related. I love Wood in this role as the attorney. He isn't taking sides, but just kind of providing the rules and context. It's a great addition as well to have Geller, Hatosa, Chang, Saranga, Carbonell, Jay, and the rest of the cast. Also credit here cameos by Cronenberg and Duran. All that's left then before I do some trivia is going to be filmmaking. Starting with the cinematography and framing, they were good. Capturing how vast yet confined the resort is was a good element. It makes it feel similar to the first movie while also being different. I love how brutally this goes at times. I'm guessing that there's a combination of practical and CGI effects. Regardless, it looked good for what we got. I also like the soundtrack. I thought that worked. The music used to set the mood is well placed, and the incorporation of songs was a fun element, especially because one of the ones they use is one that I am a big fan of, so there is that. All right, let's do some trivia then. And Bentonelli Olpin and Gillette were working on an original film centered around the sister story, set to star Newton and Weaving. However, when Searchlight approached them to direct a sequel for Ready or Not, they proposed integrating their original sister story into this universe, and Searchlight Pictures approved the idea. The directors revealed having Geller in the cast meant they could get creative with weaponry, as Geller has used almost every weapon imaginable in her years on Buffy. That's kind of a fun thing there. In the trailer, Ursula is seen wielding a long metal spike as her weapon of choice, as like a melee thing. Her Geller, wielded a very similar thing in Buffy. Newton is a fan of Geller because of that, and Newton brought in a picture of Buffy from Welcome to Hellmouth from 1997 and recreated her outfit in this film. Geller recounted there was a first scene with her, and your outfit reminds me of something, and it was like, does it? And yeah, it's kind of a funny thing there. Weaving and Newton formed a very close bond with Geller during filming. The script started out as an original story and then got adapted, like I already said. The trailer and promotional materials revealed that Grace's sister is named Faith, indicating both were given virtue names by their parents. Geller and Wood recreated the famous "Do You Wear Wigs?" Elijah meme during the promotion of the film that went viral after Geller posted it on Instagram. Newton revealed to People magazine that her role was written specifically with her in mind. She also revealed that handcuffs that were used for when they were cuffed together were real. Hatose and Wood also appeared in The Faculty together. Newton and Duran were also in their collaboration with Radio Silence and Abigail. Wood previously collaborated with Weaving's uncle Hugo in the Lord of the Rings trilogy. Geller and Carbonella previously were in the television series Ringer. Durand and Carbonella both were on Lost, at least appearing on it. Golf course scenes were shot at Rosedale Golf Club in Toronto, primarily shot in Toronto. Geller and Durand previously were in Scooby-Doo 2 Monsters Unleashed together. It looks like Wood and Carbonella previously were in 3 episodes of Wilfred as well. Cronenberg and Durand were in Cosmopolis together. And then, actually, it kind of sounds like Melissa Barra, who worked on the Scream films with Radio Silence and Abigail. She was considered for Francesca that went to Jay. Durand filmed his scenes in 3 days, which makes a whole lot of sense there, and I think that's where I'm going to leave my trivia and say, in conclusion, this successfully builds upon the foundation of its predecessor, delivering a bloody, fun, and thematically rich horror sequel. By not only revisiting the beloved characters of Grace, but also deepening her backstory and expanding the sinister lore of the game, the film justifies its return. The seamless integration of new, high-caliber cast members with the returning star power combining with solid direction, sharp cinematography, and fitting score ensures that this maintains a chaotic charm and sharp social commentary that made the original hit as well. For fans of the first film, this is an appreciated, well-executed genre romp. This 2026 follow-up was a delightful and deadly surprise. So my rating here for Ready or Not 2, here I come. I am going to give this one a 7.5 out of 10. Not going to do a spoiler section. There's not anything I necessarily need to do deeper there, so let me go ahead then and get you over to the trailer of my second featured review. And for my second featured review for this episode is going to be The Magician from 1926, written and directed by Rex Ingram, and also giving credit here because the original source material was written by W. Somerset Maugham, I think that's how you say that. And then this is starring Alice Terry, Paul Weniger, and Furman Gemier, I think that might be how you pronounce his last name. And this also has Ivan Petrovich, Gladys Hamer, Henry Wilson, Hubert I. Stowitz, Claude Fielding, Gerald Fielding, Rosita Garcia, John George, and Michael Powell. So this here is a dark fantasy, supernatural, horror, drama, romance film that is from the United States. It is currently sitting on a 6.8 on IMDb, so close, and a 3.3 on Letterboxd or Synopsis. A magician alchemist seeking to create life finds that he needs the blood of a virgin to continue his experiments. He seeks out his dwarf assistant to pick out the right girl. A little bit misleading there because he already knows who he's going to do this to, but yeah. But so this one I discovered when compiling my list of horror films from 1926. What caught my interest is that this featured Weniger. I know him from The Golem. This has him coming to the United States to make a movie, and there's a little bit of trivia about that. But other than that, seeing the title, I did come into this one blind for my Centennial Club and scouring through the sixes. So let's do some feature notes, though. And our director here of Ingram is where I'll start, as he helmed 28 features. This is the first that I've seen. He did one other one in genre with Black Orchids from 1917. There's also an assistant director here of Michael Powell. This is his only credit in the role, and he's actually the man with the balloon at the Snake Charmer. And then Ingram also did the adaptation. He did this for 17 films. First, again, that I've seen. Has one other one that he directed of Black Orchids as the only one other one in genre. Then original writer here of Mogum. They have 47 adaptations of their work, 2 motion pictures and 3 shorts. Not horror would be Secret Agent, which I actually believe Alfred Hitchcock did. Only one that he has done here in genre. Now to our cast, first is going to be Terry. She was in 31 films. First that I've seen. Only one in horror. And then her co-star of Weniger was in 61 features and 4 shorts. I've seen him in 3 now, all in genre. Overall, that would be 4%. He's done 12 in genre, and everything that I've seen is actually in horror, and that's 25% of his stuff. I've seen The Golem, How He Came Into the World from 1920. I've seen this, and The Living Dead from 1932. Top 3 that I'm missing are going to be The Golem from 1915, All Rain or A Daughter of Destiny, and then a lost film of Figures of the Night from 1920. Then the last one I'm going to give credit here is going to be Gemier. He was in 7 works. First that I've seen, only one that he's done in horror. All right, so for this one here, we learn that this is in Paris. We have an idea of where it takes place. It's going to be the Latin Quarter. So we're following Margaret Dauncey, portrayed by Terry. She's a sculptor who shares a space with Susie Boyd, portrayed by Hamer. Now she's a painter. Tragedy strike when Margaret's sculpture falls onto her, causing spinal damage. Now her uncle and guardian is Dr. Pohoit, portrayed by Gemier. He calls in a specialist to help her. His name is Dr. Arthur Bourdon, portrayed by Petrovich. He has success with this type of surgery, and Dr. Pohoit is hoping that he can perform a miracle in saving his niece. Watching on as a medical student of Oliver Haddo, portrayed by Weniger, who also dabbles in magic. Now, he actually sees a correlation with what they do with science as it comes to things that are also being unexplained. And I'll also point out here that Oliver is skilled in hypnotism. It's actually kind of interesting because he's watching in like the surgical theater, and there's somebody that makes a comment here about how Dr. Bourdon is a like miracle worker, or how he's performing a miracle, and Oliver kind of correlates it back to like the supernatural and everything like that with magic. But then we see Oliver go to a library where he searches out a rare tomb. He is attempting to create life through a magical formula. He tears out actually how to do this ritual. Something to note is that as he's leaving, he runs into Dr. Pohoit, who seems to be looking for the same book. He makes a comment knowing that the doctor will never find what he's looking for. Margaret then makes a full recovery. Arthur is smitten with her, and they go for a walk in the park. Oliver happens to be there, and he picks a rose for her. Something in there is that there's a sign saying that he should not pick anything from this rose bed or everything. There's like this plot of flowers. Margaret, just before, made a comment to Arthur about how he should do the same exact thing for her. So then this magical formula requires the sacrifice of a golden-haired, gray-eyed woman. Margaret fits this description. Oliver hypnotizes Margaret, making her believe that she is participating in a cult ritual. This is actually kind of cool, and it ends with an attempted bite on her neck, but we actually see this play out where there's like a fire, like a bonfire type thing. People are dancing around half naked. People have horns and stuff. And so Margaret was actually set to marry Arthur, but canceled the wedding the morning of and marries Oliver instead. They travel to Monte Carlo to perform the experiment from the synopsis. Arthur is determined to save Margaret again. He gives chase. It is a race and against time. So that's really my recap of the characters. Where I want to start is that this feels inspired by other films of the era, and I might be getting things mixed up in my timelines, actually. What makes it curious is that since we are still so early into the history of filmmaking, stuff is going to be borrowing mostly from written works. So we have shades of sci-fi horror with wanting to create life. It's a different variation than what you get with like Frankenstein. The movie wouldn't be out yet, but the novel was. If anything, this is more folk horror since it requires the sacrifice of Margaret. He uses hypnosis, which reminded me of Svengali. I do love the blending of science with magic. Now that I have that set up, let's kind of look at our lead character here. An issue that I have is that she's not overly fleshed out. We see her working, getting hurt, and then she's cured. Now she's out with Arthur after that. I do like this element where Oliver needs her, so he uses his abilities to influence things. There's a solid element where he's talking to Arthur. She doesn't want to do the things that Oliver is pushing her to do, but she must do as he says. There's a creepy element here of losing your autonomy and knowing it. And the character of Oliver is what I want to go next. Weniger just looks to be a great villain. I'm actually going to do some trivia about this here in a minute, but I've already brought up the idea that he's a medical student trained to be a doctor, and we also learn that he can use hypnosis. It's interesting is that this will be a technique that will become more prevalent with the development of psychiatry and the more studying of the mind. He is using it as a form of control. Weniger does a solid job in this portrayal. The intense look that he has definitely adds to it, especially for a silent film. Other elements to include here would be Arthur being this miracle surgeon. Oliver hears this and agrees that modern science is akin to a miracle. It's interesting that he's pursuing both medical knowledge and the forbidden alchemy and occult knowledge. There's also an opposite sides here with Arthur as he saves lives through this technique, where Oliver wants to create it through rituals. Shifting over to Margaret, she was sculpting the statue of a fawn, which is it looked to be evil. It definitely has horns, and if anything, it looks similar to Baphomet. It is fitting that this would hurt her, almost like life imitating the art idea. Now, something interesting to include here is that Oliver was inspired by the real-life occult person, Aleister Crowley. It's interesting that this film is more a grounded approach, as they do share the same pursuit of forbidden knowledge. And now I'm going to jump into that trivia here real quick. So this is based on a novel by Maugham, who was inspired by the experiences living as a Parisian artist at the turn of the century, where he made the acquaintance of notorious writer and English mystic Crowley. Maugham's novel was published in 1908 and was a target of a dismissive review written by Crowley himself under the name of Oliver Haddo that suggested the novelist had borrowed rather freely from his real life. Maugham wrote that Crowley served, as I have said, as a model for Oliver. It was by no means a portrait of him. I made the character more striking in appearance, more sinister and more ruthless than Crowley ever was. I gave him magical powers that Crowley, though he claimed them, never possessed. That's kind of definitely coming in there with some pot shots, and I love it. But then, getting back to this, that should be enough for the story. Let's go over the acting performances. Terry is fine as our lead. She is unfortunately overshadowed by Weniger, who commands more of your attention when he's on screen. Since he's controlling her, that does fit the narrative. Gamier works as his uncle who is concerned. Petrovitz works as the hero and love interest for Margaret. Henry Wilson works as the assistant to Oliver. I would also say that Hamer and the rest of the cast were on this offer was needed. So all that's left before I go into more of that trivia is that for filmmaking, early in the cinema, the cinematography and framing felt basic. That isn't a slight to the film. This is more of limitations of technology available. I like that Monte Carlo tower where Oliver conducts his experiment. A good touch that effectively channels mad scientist tropes that'll become popular from here. An interesting scene may have been also influenced by Faust. Now the song and imagery also resemble Fantasia. So as a silent film, the music originality is uncertain, but it definitely enhances the atmosphere for the ones that they did select. So I did want to give some credit there for that. And let's do the rest of that trivia. Now, the explosion of the laboratory definitely influenced James Whale while making the Frankenstein movies, like the one started in 1931. At the time this was filmed, the leading lady Terry was married to our director of Ingram. They were wed 4 years earlier while collaborating on The Prisoner of Zenda. This was a lost film for many years. So the surrealism of the hypnosis scene was heightened by the level of male nudity rarely, if ever, presented in films of this era. Filmed entirely in France and Monaco, the sign near the roses translates to "Do not touch the flowers." This is Michael Powell's acting debut. He played the bald man as the snake charmer's tent who misplaced his hat. Born in Dublin, Ingram studied art at Yale and was interested in sculpture. The enormous fawn statue that was created by Paul Dardy, who was alive from 1888 to 1963, which was reportedly almost 18 feet tall and weighed 4 tons. Darden himself has a cameo in The Magician as a bearded sculptor, so that's kind of cool. Weniger was largely unknown to the American cinema goers when this film was being made. Since there was some conflict here in the Hollywood studio system, Ingram decided to leave the U.S. and continue making films in Europe. He and his wife Terry formed their own studio in Nice, which was Ingram Hamilton Syndicated Limited, and shot The Magician there, as well as on location in Paris and the Maritime Alps. Only American film for Weniger. In the early 30s, Dracula, Frankenstein, and the Mummy heralded the birth of the American horror film. However, early silent melodramas such as Wallace Worsley's The Penalty, Rupert Julian's The Phantom of the Opera, and Todd Browning's The Unholy Three influenced the genre as well. In its way, this shows influence from German expressionist cinema. The hypnotist scientist reminds of Dr. Caligari, while Weniger's Haddo was the director and star of the German mystery fable of the Golem. This film's frightening bacchanal scene shows influence from The Witch's Sabbath, which is from Hoxton. I kind of got that vibe too, actually. So this was an American silent fantasy horror film that the magician's efforts to acquire the blood of a maiden for his experiments to create life is adapted from a novel, The Magician by Maugham, like we were saying. And yeah, so that's just kind of breaking this down in very limited words. This is a macabre psychological thriller. The conquering power that Ingram did was presented insanity visually, while at Universal Studios, Ingram was fascinated by physical deformity, where he was fired for employing every hunchback and dwarf in Hollywood on Universal's payroll. Ingram's assistant on The Magician was Powell, who would later direct stuff as like The Red Shoes and Black Narcissus. For theater historians, The Magician proves a rare film of the French actor Firmin Gamier in the supporting role of Dr. Pohoy. Terry's guardian in his youth, he had been influential in the Paris avant-garde theater scene, becoming an artistic director of the Theater Antonin in 1906. Gamier appeared in only 8 films. His brief appearance in The Magician gives modern audience a glimpse at the prominent modernist theater star. And there's a critic here of Carlos Clarence who wrote that perhaps the most elusive of lost films. However, since the time Clarence wrote that, various prints of this have surfaced, some screened at independent movie festivals from 93 and on, and the film had also been shown on Turner Classic Movies. It remained commercially unavailable until it was released on DVD in the Warner Brothers Archive Collection in 2011, with a runtime of 88 minutes. So in conclusion, this stands as a fascinating early entry into the horror and fantasy genres, utilizing the silent film era's visual intensity to blend occult themes with emerging scientific discourse. While Terry's Margaret may lack depth, Weniger's commanding presence of the villainous Oliver Haddo successfully drives the narrative, creating a genuinely creepy atmosphere of manipulation and forbidden knowledge. There's some classic literary and real-life inspirations combined with strong visual tropes. Particularly the setting of Monte Carlo Tower makes it a compelling watch for the interested in the foundational years of horror cinema and the intersection of science and supernatural on the screen. So my rating here, I rather like this. I need to revisit my score here at some point, but I'm giving this one, after this first watch, a 6.5 out of 10. And I'm not going to do a spoiler section. Don't necessarily need to do anything additional there, so let me go ahead then and get you over to one last break before I close out the show.
Listen, here's the truth. If it's not something you love to do, automation is mandatory. You didn't start your podcast to spend hours editing clips. You started it to create, connect, and grow your audience. But here's the problem. Every other platform works with video podcasts, and manual editing eats up your most valuable asset, your time. That's where Opus Clip changes everything. Upload your video, and Opus Clip will automatically find the gold nugget moments, auto-clip the captions for the best parts, perfect for TikTok, Reels, and Shorts. 1 hour-long episode becomes 10, 20, even 30 viral-ready clips in minutes. The tool even predicts each clip's viral potential, so you know exactly what to post. No more tenuous editing, no more wasted hours, just you staying in the place that you love to be, creating content that matters. Head to podnationopus.com for your free trial and get back to doing what you do best. Stop editing and start creating now.
Pod Nation TV has you beamed up with Out of This World award-winning podcast, found exclusively on Pod Nation TV. Download Pod Nation TV for Roku and Fire TV. Pod Nation TV, Out of This World.
And welcome back. So if you'd like to send me any sort of feedback, anything you want read on the show, or any screener requests, anything like that, you can send those to journeywithacinephile@gmail.com. If you'd like to read any of my written reviews or see any of the old past podcast episodes, all of that is being stored over at Journey with a Cinephile. That is my blog, and that's going to be horrorreview.webnode.com. If you'd like to follow me and become friends on Facebook, it's going to be David Garrett Jr. is my name over on there. There's going to be a link in the show notes. And then if you'd like to follow me on Twitter, it's going to be Buckeye from Mish. And then if you'd like to follow my Letterboxd page where I have all of my reviews, whether that is going to be horror or non-horror, that's going to be David OSU is my name on that. Instagram and Threads, I'm David OSU87. Over on my personal Instagram page, you might see some of my family stuff every now and then whenever I remember to post something. My wife is much better at it than I am. But then if you'd like to follow the Journey with a Cinephile Instagram, that's going to be Journey with a Cinephile, all one word. And then also direct you, if you'd like, to the Discord channel. That's going to be the Nightclub Discord, but I have a page over there. And there's also some other great pages of other shows and them kind of messing around and everything like that. Do highly recommend if you want to go ahead and check that out. And then the last thing I'll actually say here, if you would like to listen to the show a day early, this is always going to be streaming over there on the Pod Nation TV app. So I will have, once again, a link in the show notes for that if that is something that you're interested in. So, yeah, there's some great stuff here. There's some great shows on some of these other networks and stuff. I highly recommend checking them out. And for my next episode, we're going to be doing another of our Centennial Club episodes, and the 2 featured reviews, I'm going to be doing The Bells. I believe this is a Lionel Barrymore film, at least it might be him. It's one of the Barrymores, I know that. But I'm also going to be pairing this up with, I went to the Gateway Film Center to check out They Will Kill You. I'll figure out what the through line will be there for those ones, but then the Scouring Through the Sixes rewatch is going to be, once again, from 1986, as I check out Texas Chainsaw Massacre 2. That one might get bumped. I have something kind of that I've been thinking about doing here. I'll come back to that, but I also have some screeners here. I also have some more mini reviews for you, but I don't think there's anything else then outside of that. That should be about the extent of what I'm going to do here. So let me then just say, that wraps up this episode of Journey with a Cinephile, a horror movie podcast. Thank you for joining me on this exploration of horror cinema. If you enjoyed the show, be sure to subscribe, leave a review, and follow along for more deep dives into the macabre. Until next time, keep watching horror, and remember, fear is just a frame away.
It had been a wonderful evening, and what I needed now to give it the perfect ending